Hello, welcome to Friday I'm in Bed.
Podcast for midlife women living their best life, but in bed by 10.
Okay, as is now tradition. How long do you have to do stuff for to become a tradition? We're going to start with the
21 days.
Moan In. Kate, what's your first thing that's been bugging you this week?
Capitalization. So what I'm talking about, it hasn't just been bugging me this week. It's been bugging me for years. So what I'm talking about is when people capitalize words for no reason in the middle of sentences. So, for example, vintage is done a lot. So you might write, I am wearing a vintage, capital V, dress, little d. And it's like, no, it doesn't need a capital V. And in the wedding world, because I have a wedding blog, when I get submissions, people put bride, capital B. And now I sound like the grammar police. I don't mind people getting grammar wrong because we all can get grammar wrong. It's this like obsessive capitalizing of.
I don't think I can allow that one on the basis that I do it. So I think I'm gonna have to, and I know I do it, and I'm gonna have to cancel you for that.
No, you need to stop doing it.
I know why I do it, okay? I've got this weird thing in my head that when I was at school, I was basically taught that you capitalized names of things, right?
Well,
so you capitalized names, and that means that ever since then, somehow things like bride have become the name of a bride, right? Or doctor. I'm going to see the doctor.
Doctor does have it wrong.
Does it? Should it? No, I don't know. See, so I know that I do that. I capitalize what I think of as the names of things, especially when it relates to people. I don't think I do vintage because I worked in like vintage land for so long, but yeah, so I am definitely guilty of that because it drives my husband crazy too. So, but I'm still not letting any of you have it because I can't help it. It's just stuck.
I think that's wrong that you're not letting that in. You are wrong because it's grammatically wrong and you're not letting it in. So you are wrong.
Well, I'm the boss in this situation, so.
I've gone off.
Normally, grammar police is a given for me, but this one, because I know I do it, I don't want it to be allowed.
Me about this, you better let my next one in. What is your first moan in of the week?
My first moan in of the week is pads in sports bras and swimwear. They quite often have them in as well. They're the ones that come like in little pockets, and they're not sewn in. So the first time you put them through the wash, they fold up and sneak down into the corners so that you put them on and you look like you've got lumpy boobs. And I don't understand what they're for. Are they so because somehow I need a cleavage when I'm at the gym? Or are they to hide my nipples from prying eyes? I don't know. I don't understand what they're for. They annoy me. And it's really wasteful because I take them out of everything and I have hundreds of the things. They're breeding.
So I have a question before, without getting too personal. Do you feel that you need more padding? And I don't know how booby you are because I think they are put in to give people some shape, although I don't like them either. I'm going to say,
well, I am quite booby these days. I'm 32G, but this is a sports bra.
Yeah, but then I feel you with even just bras. So I am a 32E, so I generally buy a bigger cup and like just a bra. I don't own sports bras. I mean, why would I want one of those? But I do have bikinis, and I actually like the fact that you can remove them because I don't want extra padding. And I do.
But then what do you do with them? Why are they in there?
Well, they're wasteful, aren't they? Because
then they're wasteful. What am I going to do with them? Make little cat ears? And they're too small because they're a standard size. And so by the time you get into a fuller cup bra, they're too small. So are you allowing this then?
Yeah, no, I have going on there. Yes, no, I'm allowing it because they drive me mad too. And I'm not in sports bras because I don't own one.
Okay, what's your second one this week?
The phrase, you haven't rung me. I hear this a lot from people, which is obviously clear that I don't ring people very often. You didn't get in touch with me. You didn't ring me. You didn't text me. You haven't texted me. And I do get this quite a bit because I'm pretty rubbish at communication. However, I am really busy. And I think I can say this for so many women, particularly juggling a trillion freaking things. And I always think, well, you could have rung me. My husband does it too. Well, you didn't, or he says it about other people. Oh, they haven't rung me. And I'm like, well, you do have hands. You can pick up the telephone. You can do it yourself. So I think this is a very personal one, but it's this feeling of when you're so freaking busy and then somebody or multiple people, and it can be email as well, you haven't got back to me. I know, like literally, leave me alone. And I feel like it's linked to the amount we all have to do, particularly as women. And I feel sometimes all the onus is always on me. This is getting very personal, but I'm getting really fed up with people saying, you haven't contacted me when nobody's contacted me. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. I will allow it, not on the basis of just being a bit rubbish at replying to WhatsApps and emails and stuff
Yeah.
like that. It's like, but more on the basis of people almost using you as an excuse for reasons they haven't done stuff because they were like, oh, well, I couldn't do it until I had your input. And you go, no, you could definitely have found that yourself, right? Or like, is that the
Yeah,
kind of thing?
I think
So
it is,
like,
but I think
why does it fall on you to be responsible for the, oh, well, I haven't booked the tickets because I sent you an email asking if I should book the tickets and you didn't say yes. And you
well,
go,
this is exactly, that's exactly. And it's like, so I didn't reply. So therefore you did nothing. And it's not,
yeah,
I expect you to do nothing, but you could have picked up the phone or you could have done something to nudge
okay.
me when I'm really, really busy. I think it's linked to the expectation that we're online 24/7. And I think if you
Yeah.
are online 24/7, I am, people's expectation is that I can therefore respond and do all the stuff as well. And I'm
Like immediately, and you're like, you might need to focus. See, this I'm allowing that on the basis that it does tie in quite nicely to my my final one today, which is, shall I go?
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it's actually not this. Apart from this little bit of hair, which
I
really
thought
is
it was going
annoying
to
me
be
today. And if you're not watching this on the visuals, I'll try and put it on Instagram because it's an incredibly annoying little bit of hair on the side of my fringe, which has just decided to stick out sideways. So it's getting on my nerves. Not that bit of hair. Actually, I decided in the end it was going to be my own memory. Because whether it's chemo brain, menopause brain, just
busy
whatever,
brain.
my whole life, I was the person that held stuff in my brain in order. And I never forgot things. And now I forget everything, including what was actually going to be my second thing this week, which I thought I would remember. And then I obviously didn't. So my own memory is the thing. And I think it does tie into yours as well, because I do forget things. I'm like, I've said I'm going to do this. I've got an email. I need to reply to that email. And my brain just decides I've replied to it. And that is closed now and forgets all about it until I suddenly find it. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Yeah, so my own memory.
And I think because you've had a good memory, which is a bit like me, I've been like on top of things, and then when I'm not, the expectation for everybody else is like, well, why did you forget it? Or, you're wrong almost. And they
Yeah.
have a go at you. And it's like, no, like, please just leave me alone. No, I'm letting your memory in.
Yeah.
Mine is getting better, I have to say, which is a good thing. I seem to be getting systems in place to
Well, see, that's what
improve.
I have to work to systems, which is now where I was like, I go to my husband. We have a shared Google Calendar now, so if I'm doing anything, it's on the calendar. But he still does. I think we've discussed this before. He still will sometimes do, what are we doing next week? That's my own memory does irritate me. I forget things. I have to have lists now. I have my systems, so that it's annoying on my basis as well. But yeah, that's the other people that are used to you having a good memory, and are then like, I'll ask Jem. She knows everything. Not anymore.
Well, I'm letting that in because I get it.
Okay.
This week on Friday, I'm in bed. We're starting with the EHRC consultation on single-sex spaces and what the proposed guidance could mean for toilets, changing rooms, and other public spaces. We're talking about how this will affect all women as well as trans folk, what it means for businesses trying to navigate the rules, and why many people feel this was never the widespread crisis it was presented as in the first place. We'll also be looking at some of the less discussed parts of the guidance around supporting women, including menopause and breastfeeding.
Then we're talking about Stephen Bartlett's viral podcast confession that 3 glasses of wine after a year of sobriety ruined his life. The internet has been split between those rolling their eyes and those saying, frankly, welcome to alcohol. We're asking whether our obsession with tracking every aspect of our health through rings, watches, and apps is helping us live better, or whether wellness culture is creating a new kind of disorder wrapped up in health, but in reality is obsessive. So grab a cuppa and let's get into it.
Hi, Gemma. How are you this week?
Hi. Just randomly decided to put some lip balm on just as I press record, but there we go. I'm good. My brain's a bit frazzled. I've got a consultant appointment at the end of this week, which means that my brain gets all busy and fizzy. So I went away to spend a night in nature on Monday and spent the night in the camper van on my own, except I don't drive. So my husband had to drive me to the campsite and then walk home.
Do you not drive?
No, I did like a week's intensive course once and I absolutely hated it. But I keep thinking I'm going to try and get an automatic license. But actually getting my provisional license back is proving to be an absolute pain. And they want me to fill in a paper form. I know, right? How about you?
I've had a good week. I went away last week for a night. I went up to Whitby, to Robin Hood's Bay with my husband. That was lovely just to get away, and then came back to, revision and all that. It's 12 days to go until my children leave school. 12 days. Like, I cannot freaking wait.
Whitby's like Dracula land, isn't it?
Robin Hood's Bay, I absolutely loved. It was really quaint, little cottages, little like rose covered doorways. It was very Instagrammable. It wasn't very sunny, to be fair, for the gram, but it was lovely. Whitby was, I would say a typical seaside town. Like there's the main bit that's just a bit run down and a bit touristy, and then there's like an old town. But there's it's Dracula in the Abbey, and then there's lots of like Captain Cook stuff there where he was there. It was really nice to get away as well. That was really good. Although we drove 4 hours to get there and 4 hours back, but it was nice. So,
yeah, I was literally like 3 miles from my house, so I wasn't too bad. But yeah, it was lovely. So we got a pop-up roof on our camper, and my husband's made like a wooden platform that you can put out, so I could sit up there, and I sat up there for 3 hours reading a book just on my own. It's great.
That's lovely. We've got a camper van and we never use it, and maybe we need to more.
Yes. Get the camper out.
We do for we don't that often, but we might, take it like my in-laws have got a static caravan down on the Norfolk coast, in fact, and we'll go there. But I think what I'm inspired by seeing your stories is just going away for a night somewhere, although my husband is employed. So if you're self-employed, I suppose it's slightly easier. But that kind of idea of just going for a night somewhere would be really nice.
But you don't have to go far from home either. Do you know what I mean?
That's
like just up the road. It's lovely. It's just really nice sometimes to not be in your house.
I know. I might suggest that the idea of just going on a Monday night and watching the stars and that kind of stuff is actually really nice.
But it's the kind of thing you can get there at 4:00 in the afternoon and leave again at 10, and you've just spent the night. So if it's not far from home, anyway, that's me trying to sell the one night staycation idea. Do you know what I mean? Like, just do it.
I will speak to my husband tonight and report back to you.
Yeah. Time to crack on with it. So we are in June now, and it is officially Pride Month. And Pride started as a protest. So one of the first thing that I want to talk about is one of the big issues at the moment, which you must have seen in the news, which is the new EHRC guidelines, which are being assessed right now before they become official. So this story actually dates back to April 2025, which is when the Supreme Court made a ruling on the equality law and said that sex, as defined in the Equality Act, means biological sex, and that the protections around being a woman, therefore based on biological sex, not gender identity, regardless of whether you had a gender recognition certificate or anything like that. So that started a whole dumpster fire, which has been going on for over a year, obviously. And the EHRC has been kind of dragging its feet on producing the guidance for how this ruling should actually work in practice, with people actually applying the Equalities Act law. The guidance has now landed. As I understand it, Parliament has 40 days to assess it before it becomes the official guidance, and therefore how the law is officially interpreted and should be applied. There is actually a lot in there. I believe that they were actually working on producing new guidance prior to the Supreme Court judgment, because there have been other kind of clarifications going on in the past. But obviously the big bit that is getting all the headlines at the moment is the guidance on gender recognition certificates, gender reassignment, and above all, the toilet debate, because we're all now obsessed with toilets. The guidelines say that biological sex now has to be the thing that decides who uses single-sex spaces. So in practice, if you have a women's space, trans men should be using that, and trans women should be using the men's facilities if you have separate facilities. It suggests providing a third space instead, which includes self-contained lockable cubicles with a wash basin inside, which is something that a lot of places have for disabled cubicles. At the moment, they may have that third space already. So there's a few things that I want to get into. We've talked about this before in relation to the WI, and so this has probably come up, but this is more specifically about that. One of the first things I want to talk about is how we're currently in the middle of a full-blown moral panic about trans people in general. It's frankly not the issue that it's being made out to be. It never is. It's like when, what was it called? Section 28. We mentioned my memory, didn't we? It's like when Section 28 was introduced in the 80s due to this massive panic about promotion of homosexuality in schools. So most of us have probably shared a toilet with a trans woman at some point in our lives and had literally no idea that it was going on. Like, how closely are you really staring at other random women in toilets? Like, and if you are, maybe you're the problem. And this idea that you can always tell, which you really can't. So it cuts both ways. It leaves biological women open to being challenged and policed, and it's kind of enabling for people who are discriminatory. The guidance says that people shouldn't challenge people in bathrooms, and that if it needs to be brought up, it should be brought up sensitively. But I think that's putting a lot of faith in people over what's become a kind of emotive issue. And it also means, if we're honest, that it's far easier for a biological man to just wander into the women's toilets now than it was before. Because before, biological man had to put on a dress and a wig and some makeup if he wanted to sneak into the women's toilets because he was pretending to be a woman. Whereas now he just has to march straight in and tell everyone he's a trans man. So I don't see how that's making any women safer as well. And I did want to flag as well that there is another thing. There are other things in the guidelines, and some of them are actually good. So there are protections around breastfeeding and menopause that do something real for anybody who goes through these things regardless of their gender identity. So if you are going through menopause and you're a trans man, it's now protected as a potential disability under the law. And there are also things about breastfeeding as well. Right. Have you ever felt uncomfortable in a public space because there was a trans woman there?
No.
Like, honestly, no.
No. So for two reasons. One, well, for a number of reasons, actually. One is, as exactly as you said, most trans women live amongst us, with us, and we don't even realise. So as you said, like, actually, the chances are many, many people have shared a space with a trans woman and haven't even realised. I have shared toilets with trans women. Obviously, I don't know where they were in their transitioning phase. Where I knew they were, it was more obvious. But did it worry me? No. I know this sounds like such a kind of cliche. Did we share a lipstick? Yes. Literally, we talked about clothes. I really, really didn't have a problem. So I think, what was I going to say? My memory's gone now. Have I shared? Of course I have.
Yeah.
Have I had a problem? No.
So I think this has become an emotive topic. And this is why sometimes I feel like I'm being really careful with my words when I talk about it. But I kind of don't want to be careful with my words because I just it does make me angry. And I don't understand why it has to be an issue on this level. I understand that that gender reassignment is protected elsewhere in equalities law. So you still can't discriminate against people. And I think that is probably part of what actually starts to make it unworkable in practice. They're not IDing people on the door of public bathrooms. Like, the guidance says that members of the public shouldn't be challenging people. So it's only going to be a thing if it's brought up. And then it puts members of staff in a really difficult situation to apparently be sensitively saying to someone, should you be using that bathroom? And it's probably going to be a one-off anyway. Like, but who cares?
One of the things I've always said about it, well, always, I haven't talked about this always. This is just such a modern current thing, like in the 90s, in the noughties, I never was speaking about this because it was never a moral outcry, as you say. But for me, it's like such a red herring, this whole we need safe spaces. Of course, women need to be safe. Men need to be safe. Everybody needs to be safe. That's like a basic given. But if we were really, really, really worried about women's safety, we wouldn't allow male cleaners into toilets. There is a sign on every single public toilet in the frickin' land that says this toilet may be cleaned by a male cleaner, or by a man, or whatever, male and women, whatever it's worded. And nobody in the land is talking about we need to stop male cleaners coming into female only spaces. So therefore, this isn't about men in my eyes. This is not about men, because if it was, we would be saying male cleaners must not come in female spaces, but nobody's saying that. And another reason why I think it's such a red herring is like the trans community is 0.4% of our population, and that includes trans men as well as trans women. So it's such a small percentage that the impact is tiny on us, but huge on them. And then finally, whilst I'm on a roll, if a man wants to attack a woman, what man is going home, getting dressed up in women's clothing, totally dressed up, and then coming all the way back to do it? I mean, it's just not. If a man wants to attack a woman, he will just walk
Men
into
have
the
been
toilet.
perfectly capable of attacking women without being allowed in the bathrooms.
And they will just walk
given.
into a toilet and do it, or wait till you've left the toilet and do it. So it's like, again, I just feel like it's a red herring. And the word you used was moral outrage. And I feel like I don't think it's just on the trans community. I think we're in an era of moral outrage about everything. And we mentioned Section 28, but like, I feel like we are outraged about freaking everything. And it's like, we all just need to chill a bit.
Well, moral panics is like a very specific thing. Yeah. So media studies degree. It was a very long time ago, so some of this may have changed. Who knows? Quite often they're linked to an increase in visibility for a group that maybe hasn't been visible before. So Section 28. So actually, although homosexuality was legalized in England in like the end of the 60s, it wasn't actually legalized in Scotland and Ireland, I think, until sometime in the early 80s. So that, and, the 60s is, still only like 10 years from there. It takes some time for these things to start like rolling through. That led to, there was an increase in visibility of gay people. And then once people start seeing them, they start to then, I didn't see all these people before. They must be indoctrinating children, whereas it was always there in the past. And that was one of that was kind of the thing, the moral panic that then led to Section 28, which caused a lot of harm in the 80s and into the 90s. It was law for like 10 years before they finally repealed it. So gender recognition certificates were 10, 20 years ago now, that they were brought in. And that has led to trans people might still be 0.4% of the population, but people feel like they might be seeing them more because of things like gender recognition certificates and more acceptance. And then that's one of the things that then kind of leads to a moral panic, because people are somehow convinced that if you read comments, and I know you love to read the comments, Kate, so if you read the comments, you'll see people going, there's been a huge increase of attacks by trans women who are really men on women, and there hasn't. The actual data and the stats don't back it up, but they are seeing more of this and therefore claiming that there's been a massive increase. So moral panics we've had in the past, some of them are led by people who are like, we're seeing more of these people, and some of them might be more a top-down kind of thing. It's a typical fascist thing to find a group to blame everyone else's problems on, and it isn't you, the rich person in charge. It's blaming someone else. And the smaller the group, the easier it is to do.
I think
they're irrelevant to their problems. They're irrelevant to most people's lives. If they're a small group, a lot of people may not have come into contact with trans people, depending on where you live. And therefore, it's a lot easier to blame them for something, because that's when you get the people going kind of, well, this guy's all right because he's my mate. But, there's this other out there.
And I think a lot of that, as you said, comes from the top down in the form of propaganda that you are fed. And a lot of it comes from fear, which I also get, particularly if you feel that your life has been hard done by, or you've been marginalized in whatever way. And that might not be race, it might not be gender, it might just be to do with money and poverty and things like that. So I get the fear angle. Where I struggle is this whole feminist motion that we are women, we are feminists, we are fighting for our rights, because as women, we do not have equality, we do not have equity, and our lives are in danger, as we can see by all of the stats and all of the data. So before anyone comes back at me with that, where I struggle with the feminist thing is, what you don't fight for your cause by shitting on somebody that has fewer rights than you. You don't punch down, you need to punch up. And I get it if you're in a fear situation, like I do get that, and then the propaganda works on you more because you feel life is really bad. I get that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I get it's a thing. But if you are a woman, particularly a lot of the women fighting this are very privileged white women, I have to say, and very privileged. I'm not seeing, I mean, yeah, there will be people with less privilege talking about it too, but generally speaking, the people that are online and shouting about it and protesting and going to the Supreme Court are privileged white women, and they're punching down. And you don't punch a smaller minority that has less equity and less equality than you. Like, that isn't how it should work.
It isn't how it should work, but there is an element there, especially when these are women with a lot of money and independence. I mean, I'm going to specifically mention J.K. Rowling because she is like queen trans exclusionary radical feminist, or TERF, and has put a lot of money into a lot of these lawsuits. So I will name her. But the thing is that these are women who do have that privilege. And when they see kind of rights being eroded, which things are in a lot of spaces at the moment, part of it is then that desperation to cling on to that privilege. So it's kind of like aligning with your oppressor.
Well, I was about to say that.
If I align with my oppressor and give them someone else to focus on, they won't take away the things that I have.
Yeah.
And that's one of the, if you can persuade other women that these people are taking something away from you, and giving trans women rights does not remove your rights as a biological woman. It's, women are women. And we should be sticking up for each other, which seems simple to me, but it never is.
The thing you said about aligning with the oppressor is so true, because what you're doing by making it your entire identity, I hasten to add, and not just J.K. Rowling, but other women I know, literally personally know, they're making it their whole identity, and they're letting men who are attacking women off the hook, because they're not mentioning that. Their whole focus is on trans women. And it's like, well, when you look at the stats around rape, domestic abuse and murder, it's not trans women, and it's not even men dressing up for the day. And I'm saying that because I've heard that, they'll go home and put it on, wear it. Just, no, this is your husband. This is just, more women get murdered by their son than strangers in the UK. I mean, that is a crazy stat, but you're more at risk from the people in your life than somebody who has questioned and has transitioned their gender. I mean, honestly, it drives me crazy.
I hope that we're just going through one of those occasional things where everyone has a panic and then they go, oh no, we're all out of it. But I hope that this is the peak. But
I saw yesterday, there's some guys I know on Facebook, like just the random people and he was getting his knickers in a twist, I'm going to say, because he was getting very upset because he had to put his pronouns on a job application, and he ranted about it. And everybody was agreeing, because obviously, you kind of attract the same people, And there was this one comment from a guy who actually I don't like. Was really mean to me as a teenager, because these are people that I go way back with. Anyway, he interestingly was the one that was like, he said something, it's amazing how much time you can spend on something that bears no relation to your life. And I was like, yes. And then the guy was like, about him. And he was like, mate, you are a little speck on this planet who will die one day, like as in you're here temporarily. Just worry about your life. But it's so true, isn't it? Oh, what's the name of the woman? She was in Orange is the New Black, the trans woman in, what's her called? Laverne, I think she's called. She started a whole campaign of you're worrying about the wrong 0.5%. So it's the 0.5% are trans and the 0.5% are billionaires. You're worrying
with the 0.5% with all the money. Yeah, maybe we should focus a bit more over there. I mean, I do think that the guidance, particularly around toilet spaces, could be harmful to everyone. Like we said, we've discussed the actual safety issues. I also have a suspicion that it's going to lead, or could potentially lead, to fewer women's toilets, even if it's just because, I mean, how many times have we been somewhere and there's a massive queue for the women's toilets and the men's toilets, people just walk in and out?
But I'm going to say this I'm sure but for the audience, because that's the planners thinking about equality and not equity. So they've made floor space exactly the same size for women as they have men, but women spend longer in toilets and go to the toilet more often,
have
children, have
cubicles.
periods,
And have cubicles, whereas men can
exactly
wee in a trough, apparently.
The impact on businesses, though, as well. So I think it's going to be good that there will be some guidance, because obviously the ruling happened and then everybody's like interpreted it, haven't they? So I think actually if there is guidance, I suppose that's a good thing now. But businesses are obviously going to have to create a space that is safe for the trans community. Remember, 0.4%. And I'm not.
They're still not allowed to be discriminatory.
Yeah, and I'm not dismissing them by saying it's 0.4%, but I'm now talking about the business now has to create another space or refit it all or do something. And hospitality is on its knees. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I think because, I mean, especially when you're dealing with a lot of places that may be in like listed buildings or old buildings, there's not always, I mean, even disabled provisions can be pretty scarce and hard to come across. So the idea of literally just turning that into a third space rather than a disabled bathroom is not even workable either. So, and you know, I think we've mentioned that before, not all disabilities are visible. And also, I kind of just genuinely hate the idea that people out there will be like judging women purely on their appearance. They're not asking for ID. They're going, oh, she looks a bit muscly. She looks a bit muscly. Do you think she's actually a woman?
That has
I'm
happened
like,
already.
A bit of a square jaw or short hair.
But that has happened, hasn't it? And people have been challenged who are more masculine presenting females, women, and that's not right. And who's policing that anyway? Because it's so, you said at the beginning that it's got to be done in a sensitive way. By who? What, the security guard? Or
by, like, how do you train someone on the checkouts in Sainsbury's or whatever to sensitively deal with someone coming up to them going, I think a trans woman's just gone into the women's toilets?
I know. And then also people will take it upon themselves. But then again, that's back to the whole kind of what women should look like. You know, are you female? Are you feminine enough for this toilet? Which is absolute bullshit. But it's we need to just talk though about menopause, don't we? And breastfeeding.
Yeah. See, this is what I did want to cover, the few quiet updates that were in it, because if we're talking about them, I do think that it's worth mentioning that there were some things in there. So breastfeeding. It covers conduct related to breastfeeding can now be unlawful harassment on the grounds of sex. So in practice, asking someone breastfeeding to move, stop or cover up in a service setting where a man wouldn't be asked, that's a new clarification. So that could be illegal. Menopause, it's recognised that menopause can meet the definition of a disability where it significantly affects everyday life, which for a lot of women it does. And that triggers reasonable adjustment duties. So any claims for that can run on disability, sex and or age grounds.
That one does worry me, I have to say. Obviously, it's good because women need to be able to work and carry on with their lives. But again, practically, how are businesses there's 10 common symptoms of menopause, there's 80 symptoms overall, and they all come in different forms and different weights. Do you know what I mean? And so for all these businesses to make a reasonable adjustment, I want them to, but again, it's like, how is that going to be policed? Because
I also think sometimes there is a concern with these things because cancer is a protected characteristic as well. But I know plenty of people who've struggled with their employer when they've had cancer or they've struggled to get jobs, and they have to make reasonable adjustments for you. But also, if it's you or someone else for a job and they can think of another reason that isn't cancer that they haven't employed you, it's incredibly difficult to prove that that's the reason that you weren't employed.
And
for the position.
I worry. Obviously, I really want businesses to support women. End of. But we're talking about periods, we're talking about menopause, and we're talking about pregnancy. Women will go through two of those without a doubt. So how do we make sure that we are still getting the jobs? Because that's a lot for the employer to have to work with. And it's a tricky one. I want to be really clear. I want women to be looked after in the workplace.
Yeah.
But practically, how does that happen? Particularly with small businesses who have very little money.
There's also some clarification on pregnancy and maternity that goes back to the trans thing as well, because it actually specifically clarifies, I believe, that trans men who become pregnant are covered. So there's also a little bit of same-sex marriage stuff updated too, but I think the last guidance was written before equal marriage existed. So that's just kind of like a housekeeping update to some of the guidance. So not everything in it is completely negative. When the Supreme Court made their judgment in the first place, they called the code as it was written unworkable. However, the new guidance now, the BMA and lots of other places also saying that it's unworkable. I mean, one of the things is there is literally no way to prove your biological sex. You can change any documentation that you had.
Yeah, but you can change it on Canva, for goodness sake, and photocopy it.
But you can change. I mean? You can get your passport that reflects your new gender identity. You can get updated birth certificates that reflect your new gender identity, driving licenses, anything that you can ask for could be changed to show a different gender identity than the I guess the biological sex you were born with.
So the only way you can prove it
different issues.
Is show your body.
So how on earth are you going to prove it anyway?
Well, this is it. Showing your body.
And it can affect,
you're not going
to, women who've had mastectomies. I mean,
yeah.
I literally know women with double mastectomies who've faced abuse from people, especially if you just had cancer. You've double mastectomy and lost all your hair. And anyway, I do want to finish because it being Pride Month is one of the reasons that I thought this was a good one to cover today. And Pride was originally a protest, and whilst the glitter and the sparkle is super fun, we're not gonna deny that we love a Pride parade. I think increasingly recently it's becoming really important to remember that its origins are in protest and that there's still an awful lot to protest about.
I want to talk about something that's been all over the interweb in the last week, and that is Stephen Bartlett's podcast. We have talked about him before. I'm sure we'll talk about him again. But he basically said that after 1 year's sobriety, of which, to be fair, has been cut out of most of the clips, he said he had 3 glasses of wine in an evening and it ruined his life. He said that it ruined the next 3 days of his life is actually what he was talking about. Obviously, ruined his life was way more clickbaity to put on the reels. And he talked about the fact that he hadn't drunk for a year. He had 3 glasses of wine and that affected his sleep that night, which then affected his performance the next day, which led to him making bad food choices. He wasn't so good in the gym and he podcasted worse, I think is what he said. And as ever, it's kind of blown up. I think obviously he loves this because it gives lots of promotion to his endeavors as well as his podcast. But how it kind of divided the internet because there was a lot of people, saying, who are you? The fun police. I've had enough of this. I should be able to drink alcohol. Leave me alone. And that's actually what kind of happened at the beginning and lots of laughing at him. But then people started to say, well, actually, if you quit alcohol for a year and you have 3 glasses of wine, actually it is going to bugger up your sleep. And if you don't sleep well, yes, it does impact your day. We do know that. And then loads of perimenopausal women came forward and started saying, well, actually, if I have 3 glasses of wine, it writes me off for a couple of days too. So there is something into, what he has said. But I'm not going to focus on that so much, although let's talk about wine, of course. It's easier for me to talk about that because I am 11 years sober, and I know that if I had 3 glasses of wine, I'd probably be written off for a month. But regardless,
I had 3 glasses of wine last night, so I'll leave it up to you to decide whether I'm podcasting worse.
Your memory is worse, though, so maybe it is. Who knows? Anyway, we're not talking about that. I digress. Obviously, the concept of alcohol upsetting your sleep and having poor sleep leads to feeling fuzzy and all that. Like, this is not new news, is it? We know this fact. We know it affects your sleep. We know that. But the bit I really want to focus on is the bit that people aren't focusing on in this little snippet that's going on. He says, I know that I slept worse and I made worse choices because my ring, my phone and my app told me #sponsored, #ad, literally his words. So the tracking led him to realise. Now, to be fair, I'm sure he realised when he woke up feeling a bit rubbish. But anyway, he really reinforced the tracking bit. And this is the bit that has, I suppose, worried me, upset me, or caught my eye more than the fact that 3 glasses of wine after a year's sobriety has made you feel a bit rubbish. Because I have this real worry and fear for us as a population that we are becoming incredibly obsessed with tracking and optimizing everything. We know we need 8 hours of sleep. We know we need to walk more. We know we need to eat better. Like, we know this, but this obsessive tracking worries me. Obviously, if you're training to do a marathon, or you're training, you're going to track. If you're on a weight loss journey, you are going to track. But if you're not, this obsessive tracking, like, is it really helping us? And it's leading on to more things I'm seeing around biohacking. So all these things that I do to make my body 20 years younger,
This
whether
is the word that we had before maxing, isn't it? Before maxing, we hacked everything.
Yeah, it's interestingly though, because maxing is really linked to like bad, because it's the manosphere and it's all that. But biohacking, it's really like new age and forward
wellness
thinking
version.
Yeah, whether it be red light therapy, vibration plates, the things you put on your skin, like all these things. There's nothing wrong with any of these things, but it's becoming incredibly obsessive. And I can see it's leading to disordered behavior. I can see it with people online and I can see it in real life. But because it's under the guise of health, nobody's worrying about it. If it was linked to gambling or linked to eating, just eating, let's just say, so moving on to like eating disordered behavior, we would be worrying about it. But because it's like health and wellness, it's all very great. And I feel like it's addictive, it's taking over. I do agree that life is for living. And if you're tracking everything, like, are you really enjoying your life? And I'm worried for my kids. My kids are teenagers. They're not worried about this stuff. They're just living their lives. Are they in 10 years' time, in their late 20s, going to start biohacking and obsessing over everything, I mean? And then finally, before I open the floor, these people talking about it are monetizing it. So he actually said on my Aura watch and my this app or whatever it was, or a ring, sorry, and my watch, hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored. They're monetizing. So these people that are getting us to be addicted to tracking everything are making so much money. And is that really different to casino apps? And I know it's wellness and health, so it's good, but it's making me worried about people. And I wanted to talk about that as well as wine. So let's start with, have you got a smartwatch, Fitbit, or a ring? Do you track?
Yeah, I have an Apple Watch.
And what do you track?
I got dragged into Apple Watch world. I had a Garmin before that. Probably running was the thing that got me into that, because I love having the actual data. You can see a map, you can see how fast you went, you can see, love it. See how far you went. It's great. I don't have to like work all this stuff out. Look at your speed while you're going. And that was why I started with apps that did that for running. And then I got a Garmin watch, and then the Garmin, I think I got a Fitbit first. So I had a Fitbit first that would track these activities, and also tracked it was basically a fancy pants step tracker, so that you could keep an eye on your activity. And then gradually they've added more and more functions to it. So they will check things like your pulse, temperature, heart rate variability, tracking your sleep if you wear it overnight. And I confess that I do love some stats, but mostly I find myself using them to go, I'll either go, I feel rubbish. Yep. It agrees. And that's quite good, though it is also quite frustrating when it doesn't agree. You go, no, I feel awful. Why aren't you telling me? Why aren't you backing this up with stats? So I do love it. I do love a statistic. And I do think that they can be incredibly useful in certain contexts as well. So for instance, I have a chronic cancer, so I am living with cancer, and I am also living with an awful lot of powerful drugs that I take. And sometimes they can help me see things like I'm going to go and have a 24-hour heart monitor put on soon, because I've noticed that I've been having kind of palpitations, but I've also noticed that my heart rate is very low, which can be a side effect of one of the drugs. So these are the kind of things that it can be kind of useful for, and it can help you spot things like before, you can help you spot things before they become a problem. If you suddenly go, oh, why is that particular stat taking a nosedive, or, that kind of thing. I think the issue with your average regular person on the street doing it is, like you said, like, just live.
I think because I am not living with cancer, I'm not taking any medication. So, I absolutely get it. And also you like running.
Yeah.
So therefore it's
And I
interesting.
do exercise, so I love to track it. If it's not tracked, didn't happen.
But I don't. And if I do go for a walk, do I need to know how long I like if I go for a walk in the woods near me, I now do know it's 5K because my friend has an Apple Watch and she tells me. But I'll walk for an hour and that's good. And I think I don't need to know. I don't need to know whether I had a good sleep or not. I don't need a watch to tell me if I slept well last night. I can tell you I had a terrible night's sleep because my dog barked till 1:30 in the morning. I don't need this to tell me that. And if I had a really good night's sleep, I see people who had a good night's sleep and they go, my sleep wasn't optimized last night. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do about it? Because it's gone. Can't do anything about that. But maybe you could do something tonight. But like just have a bath and read a book. I think there's some things we can do. So I'm not advocating for your health and your well-being, but it's this like, my sleep wasn't optimized. And it's like, oh my God, just go to bed. Stop worrying about it.
I think that's one of the things that, back to kind of Stephen Bartlett particularly, and this 3 glasses of wine that he had. I mean, we all know that if you have a drink, you may have a hangover, especially if you've not drunk at all for a year, and then you have half a bottle of wine, which is roughly what he's saying he had. So, yeah, we get that. I want to ask, and then he's saying, I podcasted worse, I did this worse, and like everything was off for 2 or 3 days, but kind of,
so
what impact did that really have on your life? And also, I want to ask why he had the 3 glasses of wine.
Well,
I haven't listened to any further of that, but
I think
this is one of the issues that I see with a lot of diet culture as well, which, I have no issue. I'd lost weight. I've got no issue with people wanting to lose weight. It's a bit like not having an issue with the men, but it's the patriarchy we've got. Do you know what I mean? But it's diet culture and wellness culture and purity culture, as we've mentioned before, these things where there's a whole kind of system around it where it starts to cause problems. And when you look at diet culture and you hear people saying like, oh, I was so bad yesterday, I feel so awful, I went out with my friend and I had an ice cream and a cake and we went to the beach and then we ate chips and I was so bad, and they'll stress about it for days because they might have gained a quarter of a by eating some chips and ice cream at the beach with their family. And I think that that's so sad because that is your life. You do not exist to be an optimal human being. You don't exist to sleep well.
I know, but that's why I'm so worried, because when you say, oh my God, I had a piece of cake and I've ruined everything and my life, it's so dreadful. We know that's diet culture and we really need to stop that. And there are no good foods and bad foods. There's just food. We worry about it or we call it out or whatever. But because this is under wellness, it's kind of accepted. So yeah, back to Stephen. I think he said, well, I had a year off and I was feeling really clean. He used the word clean, which I don't like. So he sort of thought he'd be all right. And I think, well, no, because alcohol is still going to do what alcohol does, because that's what alcohol does. But you're right, this whole, and then I did things worse. Well, it doesn't matter. We all have bad days. And when you said that, it made me think, tell me you're a man without telling me you're a man. Without telling me you're a man. Get the phrase right. Because, hey, we have bad days for about a third of the month because of our hormones and because of our cycle. I mean, obviously everybody's different, but we have bad days all the time. We have, if you have a period, in the 3rd week of your phase, you'll podcast worse probably, but on your 1st and 2nd week of the month, your podcast will be amazing.
Smashing the podcasting.
Doing the podcast in week 2 of our cycle. But the point is like, that we know that we're women, we know that. So it is quite a masculine thing, I think, as well. But as you said, it doesn't matter. You're allowed a bad day. And one word you just used, which I really want to pick up on, is the purity culture. So there's wellness. Well, there's wellness, which is health and wellness. Try and get 8 hours sleep. Sleep is good for you. It helps with cognitive function and it helps with your body. It's good. We know. But then there's optimizing purity obsession. And it's just, I'm worried about people, because if you were talking about a different type of tracking, so say you were slim and you were tracking your calories obsessively, I would be worried, because you don't need to, type of thing. Obviously, everybody's slightly different, but you might go, "Oh, but he's a healthy man. He doesn't need to do all of this." Well, he might not be healthy. I have no idea. You know, like, but it's
I
like,
know what you mean. Is that as far as we know, using
yeah,
him as
and
an
you're saying
example,
you
he is
track.
a healthy, well-rounded human being. So feeling a bit off for a couple of days because you had a glass of wine with a friend is not the be-all and end-all of your life. You can do that, and it's not ruined your life, even for 3 days.
I know, and even if you have another few glasses, you know, like, you do have choice, but it's like, it's okay. Like, we don't have to be optimized. When did we start talking about being optimized? I thought we were just trying to be healthy, but now it's no, healthy's not enough. I'm healthy. You know, I could do more, but you know, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, I'm not on any medication, I eat healthily, I do try and move a bit more, I need to do a bit more. But you know, I'm a healthy person, but I'm not optimized. But does it really matter? Do I have to be optimized?
I do think, so I think about this a lot, is that there is a lot of privilege,
I was going to say
obviously. But
privilege, you're going to say.
I feel like there's another word that I can't quite put my finger on, because I picked up on, and I know this isn't what you were saying, but I picked up on that when you said I'm not on any medication there. And I think that there is this idea that you are somehow in control, and that all of these things, and if he optimizes all of this stuff, then he is somehow kind of perfect being, you know? And that he will not get sick. He will not
But that's
suffer these things. And I know that that's not what you were meaning when you said you weren't on any medication, but this idea of being healthy, and that somehow relating into like purity culture and this wellness culture, and then this biohacking thing, then does start to relate into this idea that if you are not healthy, you are doing something wrong, and that you are responsible for this. And that is one of the things that concerns me in kind of a broader sense. And as someone who, I consider myself healthy. I do drink. I don't drink anywhere as much as I used to, but that is my vice, is to have an occasional drink. I don't smoke anymore. I did many years ago. I don't smoke. I go to the gym, I do Pilates, I run, I do a lot of exercise, considering, again, maybe not quite as much or in the same way as I used to, because I have physical limitations now that don't allow me to do these things. And the medication that I take does sometimes provide me with limitations in things like energy and that kind of thing. However, the suggestion that maybe any of my diseases, you know, I had childhood asthma as well that has carried on through life. I have hay fever that really debilitates me sometimes, you know, so I take medication for those things as well. I have high blood pressure, and the reason I have high blood pressure is not lifestyle related. It's related to a muscular thing in my arteries that makes them look like a string of beads, and I have cancer. So I have what could be described as multiple comorbidities, and there is nothing I could have done to prevent those diseases, no matter how optimized I was according to my watch or an app or whatever. It starts to get a bit eugenic, where you're going, there's a master race that is optimized and looks at all their stats and has made everything perfect. And it happened a lot over the pandemic, where there was this kind of, it's all right, COVID only affects people with comorbidities. Like, I consider myself a healthy person. I do the things that I can to stay healthy, but I still have those comorbidities. That doesn't make my life any less worthwhile. You know, your purpose in life is not to constantly function at the peak of human ability. Ran over.
No.
Maybe.
Firstly, I didn't mean that if you take medication.
I know that's not what you meant there. It just reminded me of it.
Do. And also, there's a whole, it's got to the point though, also it's the products you put on your skin, if they're not 100% natural, then you're not biohacking. So therefore, if you just use Nivea, just to name a brand, you are bad. Ultimately, good and bad, clean and dirty. They don't use the word dirty, but you know what I mean. So it's becoming, I don't know if it is already, as you said, purity, but almost like, I am better than you because I'm doing all this. In brackets, can afford to do all of this. It's worth really saying. And it's like, But it doesn't mean you won't get hit by a bus tomorrow. I'm saying that, I hope nobody
Yeah.
does get hit by a
This
bus.
is the thing, is that nobody knows. All of us could become disabled at any time. That's like,
Well, yeah, or it's not doesn't mean you won't get, an illness or a terminal illness. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means you're super healthy or strong or whatever it is now.
just
And then
literally all it means is that your stats are good.
but nobody seems to be worried about this. And I think when we talk about, let's say, looks maxing, for example, which we have talked about, and young boys and, trying to disfigure and change themselves. And obviously that's awful, awful. And we're all in agreement. It's just awful. But then there's people that are doing like big, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not optimizing. Obviously, it's not. I'm not getting my words out. It's health and well-being, which is a good thing, but it's just it's still dangerous because they're going off on this other end of craziness, in my eyes, that most people is unachievable and not necessary, and it's addictive, and people are making money from it. People are exploiting it, and it worries me. And in fact, that whole podcast has become it. I don't know if you listen to Daryl, the CEO, or no, I don't now. I used to really like it when he used to interview CEOs.
It being what it was supposed to be originally.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. I remember right at the beginning, he interviewed Trini and he interviewed the woman that is the founder of Ann Summers. And it was fascinating because they talked about life and relationships and
Somebody Gold, Jacqueline Gold.
yes, really, really interesting about her life, but also juggling with parenting. And, it was just really, really interesting. But somewhere it morphed into the whole, you have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be your optimum, but I was asleep. Like, how am I supposed to do that and get up at 5 in the morning? And
I think it is part of the kind of political culture we're in at the moment. The kind of idea of, almost, again, like, I keep coming back to eugenics. I'm sorry, this was supposed to be the light topic.
I know.
Physical purity.
That's where I was getting to with the looks thing, which I never got there. But
it's a focus on like physical qualities as somehow a representation of your moral goodness.
Can I say that's exactly what I was trying to say. You had 3 glasses of wine. You are now officially not podcasting worse because I couldn't get it out of my head. So if you're, rewind and listen to me babbling on, that is what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Yay, we got there in the end. Yay! Physical purity as a representation of moral purity. Yeah,
that is exactly it.
Yeah. And I think we see it in a lot of things.
Yeah, it is. It's worrying me because it's wrapped up in health. I think that's and well-being. And well-being makes you think of it's just good things, good natural things is what I mean. But it's gone to such extreme.
But in these particular cultures, it started to become a way to exclude people that don't have the privilege to, going for a walk isn't enough. It has to be an optimized walk to the exact staying in a heart rate range, which means you need an expensive watch to find.
And that people can't afford the watch or the ring.
Exactly. So it started to become a way to almost exclude people from this level of well-being.
Yeah, and you're beaten up about it online. So again, you'll be, you feel you're being beaten up. So I obviously work with menopausal women and, the feeling, there's a meme that keeps going around saying, I've never felt so much pressure to have 140 grams of protein. Like I felt more pressure.
Yeah.
I feel more pressure to take have the protein than to take the drugs when I was 20, because it's this pressure. Like it can't just be, which is what I say, eat more protein and fiber, but actually eat whole food and just try and eat better. And if you can't do 10,000 steps, just try and do more steps this week than you did last week, but it's this, you have to. And I think it makes people feel like a failure, but also blaming themselves. And it's exhausting, I think, isn't it?
A very conservative thing as well to focus on those personal responsibilities rather than the societal responsibilities, to suggest that this is your fault and something that you can fix, and that if you're having a problem, you are doing something wrong, rather than it being the idea that if you're not eating perfectly, then it's your fault, not the idea that there are food deserts and there are people having to rely on food banks and that people don't have enough money to eat properly, and the societal issues that feed into that. So that idea that Well, if only you'd optimised all of the stats on your watch, you wouldn't need the NHS, would you?
Yes. And we all know people that want to privatise the NHS. You do
Yeah.
see that online, and you see people saying literally the word lazy. So if you can't walk 10,000 steps a day, you are lazy. I see that all the time. And it's like, well, I'm working, not me, women or men, but often it's aimed at women. I'm working 3 jobs and I've got 3 kids. I ain't lazy.
Yeah.
I don't have any time to walk 10,000 steps. And also I live
And
in
also, if I didn't have a stupid watch, I wouldn't know how many steps I'd walked anyway.
Exactly. And I think this is the bit. Like, was life, and I know you love a stat, and, it's really
I love a
good.
stat, but they have their place.
It's really is amazing that we have this technology. But remember when we just walked and we didn't track? We just went for a walk. Remember when we just had a piece of cake and we didn't have a fit because we hadn't, had Greek yogurt on the side, which I love. I do love, and I do eat a lot of, because so that I got my protein in. Remember when we just kind of lived? And I think this is the bit. It's not about 3 glasses of wine. It's about the fact that you can't seem to just live anymore without somebody rocking up and telling you you've failed because you didn't hit your protein target today. I mean, like, I'm not being funny. I survived the day and my kids are alive. The dogs have been fed. There's a roof over my head. Like, it's okay. I didn't get my protein in. Thank you for joining us for another roundup of midlife chat, hot takes, and occasional moaning. Well, quite a bit of moaning.
Make sure you hit subscribe so your podcast app gently nudges you every Friday, because honestly, who remembers anything without a reminder these days? And also, we like people liking us because we're very needy.
And if you fancy being extra lovely, leave us a rating or a review. It helps more brilliant women like you find us. Have a great weekend, everyone, and make sure you find time for yourself. You deserve it.